all right. I hadn't practiced the introduction. I
This is Jim Campbell, and he's over 70.
Just barely.
The video will show that.
70 and a half.
All right. Are we good to go?
Go.
All right. I'm here with Jim Campbell. He played for the Houston Colt 45's back in the early 60s. And, all right, let's get into it.
Okay.
What drew you to baseball in your childhood?
I'm sorry, what?
What drew you to baseball in your childhood?
Well, I had two uncles that were baseball players. They were not professional baseball players, but years ago there were a lot of industrial leagues and company-sponsored teams in the Bay Area, and they both played baseball. And then I was born on a ranch, and we had 12 acres, so we had a lot of acreage in the back. And right next door was a company that housed all their employees in barracks type. So on Sundays, every Sunday we would have these huge baseball games. We'd play up from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. And all of these guys would come over, adult people, and even my mother was that. As a matter of fact, my mother said, I was born on the ranch. So my mother, I was told that she played right up to the time, the next morning, I think she had me.
Really?
Yeah, so that's really probably when I really first started. And that was softball, of course. Mm-hmm. And then later on, I started playing, not equivalent to Little League, but it was like American Legion. There was really not a lot of organized baseball in those days. Like I said, Little League had just come in, and that really took off.
Still developing.
But then once that Little League group, from the kids from 8 to 12, once they graduated, then they started with Joe DiMaggio League and all these other leagues, all the way up to American Legion. And unfortunately, I didn't play in any of that because I had missed Little League. And then I started playing. There was a local team called Palo Alto Oaks, which was a semi-pro team sponsored by Merchants of Palo Alto. And my father was a friend of one of the owners of the team, organizers, and I started out with them as a bat boy. I was like 10 years old, I guess. And I would work out with them and take batting practice and this and that. And then I kept doing that for a few years. And then we went on a road trip up to Eureka to play in Northern California years ago. Teams like Redding and Red Bluff and Susanville, Ukiah would hire all these college kids to come in, and they would work in the mills or drive a truck or work in a grocery store and stuff, and they'd play 3 or 4 nights a week. So our semi-pro team would go up and play those teams. So we went up to Eureka, and because our team was made up of all adults, I mean, they all had jobs. There were a few people that there was 3 or 4 guys that had played pro baseball, not in the major leagues but minors, and they came home and they were working at different jobs, and they played, but we played on Saturdays and Sundays. So we went up to Eureka to play, and we only had 10 guys on the team. And our center fielder, during batting practice, was chasing a fly ball, and he had a big wad of tobacco in his mouth. And he stepped on a sprinkler head and fell and swallowed the whole plug of tobacco. So then they had to take him to the hospital to have his stomach pumped. So the manager came to me. I was like 13 or 14, I think, and I had a uniform. So he said, Jimmy, you're going to have to play. So, and there again, I had never played at night before. So I played, and I guess I did all right, because from that point on, I kept playing for the team. And when I was in high school, I played for that team also. So that really sort of, graduated my level of play, because I was playing with I was only 15 years old, and most of the guys that were like in their early 30s or late 20s. Wow. So it was really an education, and they kind of took me under their wing and helped, instructed me in certain things, but it was really it was really an education.
Very cool. So, who was your favorite player growing up, and why?
There again, you know, when I looked at that question, not having any major league teams out here,
Yeah.
I only knew of people like Willie Mays or Ted Williams and that sort of thing. And if I mentioned a couple people for somehow I kind of liked them, and Al Rosen was one of them, who was the third baseman for the Cleveland Indians, and I followed him pretty closely. And then later on, I met him because he was the general manager of the San Francisco Giants when they were when Bob Lurie sold the team. And then I guess the other person I really liked was Willie Mays, of course. You know, that was really in his heyday when he was in New York. So I followed them fairly closely.
Okay. What was it like going through the development leagues? Because I think you played 6 years in the minors.
Yeah, that was really pretty difficult. You know, I signed the night I graduated from high school. The scout, in those days it was before Major League Draft. Now they have a combine where every name goes into a list and every team knows everything about every prospect in the country. Well, in my day, they had a lot of scouts, and scouts would just go out and look through the bushes and find players. So I guess I attracted several people to Palo Alto High School, and one of the guys I was really fond of was Bob Fontaine. He was the head scout for the West Coast for the Pittsburgh Pirates. So he used to bring me gloves, which was illegal. He'd bring bats and everything for me when I was a kid. So the night I graduated from high school, I went home and he was at my house. And we signed. My father was there and we signed. And then the next morning he picked me up and we drove to Modesto. And there's a team in the California State League, was their Class C minor league team, California State League. You know, there was Stockton and Bakersfield and San Jose and Modesto, Sacramento, all these teams in the league. So I started out, I was 18 years old, and he drove me to Modesto, and I played that first night. And I had played center field in high school. So when I joined the team in Modesto, I was playing. It was called the Salinas Packers. That was their Class A league or C team in the California State League. The manager came to me and asked me if I'd ever played the infield, and I told him I had. You know, I played shortstop and stuff. He said, "Well, you're playing third base tonight," and that was kind of a shocker. I was scared to death. So so then I just became a third baseman, and the next year I went to spring training in Huntsville, Texas. Georgia drove me to the
train station.
Yeah, Southern Pacific train station in Palo Alto, and I took a train from here with one other person, one other player. We stopped in, I think, Bakersfield and picked up a couple more. Got to Los Angeles, picked up 7 or 8 more, and in Phoenix a few more. We went all the way to Huntsville, Texas, and that was my first spring training. And in those days, I think Pittsburgh had like 14 or 15 minor league teams. So I mean, there was like 1,000 guys down there. It was we lived in barracks and edited a mess hall, and it was really something. And then there was a observation tower in the middle of this, and there were 4 diamonds off, like a clover leaf, off the field, and then there were some other fields. Well, all the scouts and managers and stuff were all up in this tower, and it was before video, I'm sure, but you know, they were up observing the players, and from that, the way you performed, then we were chosen to play on a particular team. You know, we had like 2 or 3 triple A teams. We had 2 or 3 double A teams. We had A teams. See, now in the minor leagues it starts at A, but when I was playing, there was a D league, a C league, an A, and so forth. So I was picked to go to Billings, Montana in the Pioneer League.
Complete shift.
Yeah, it was.
That's crazy.
Plus, I remember opening night, we opened night in Missoula, Montana. It was opening day. In those days, minor league baseball was really a big attraction because it was really before television, and there really wasn't a heck of a lot more to do in these small towns. And so there must have been 4,000 or 5,000 people out there, and they had the high school band was out there, opening ceremonies and stuff, and we were out finishing infield stuff, and it started snowing. And I remember I was playing third base, and I had my glove over my left ear because the snow was blowing into my ear. And that was my introduction to minor league baseball. The year before I had, it was all very new to me. But that first year of actually playing the whole year was at Billings, Montana. So I went there, and then the next year I went to, where'd I go? Lincoln. My baseball card will show you. I think I went to Lincoln, Nebraska, which is an A league, and I had a real bad. I was chasing a foul ball down the left field line, down behind third base, running back this way, and our left fielder was coming in to get it, and he saw we were going to collide, so he went into a slide, and his knee hit me in the calf, and ruptured my calf muscle. So when I got to Lincoln, Nebraska, it was like 30 degrees, and I tried to play, and I just couldn't loosen up or anything. So they sent me down to Arizona, to the Douglas, Arizona, which is the same league, same qualification, but it was like 110 every day down there. So that was really something. So, and down there were 4 teams in Mexico and 4 teams in Arizona. So we traveled by these suburban wagons that you see PG&E and construction companies. That's how we had 4 of those, and that's how the team traveled.
That's awesome.
And we would go across the desert into Mexico. I remember the first time we went into Cananea, Mexico, and we drove in. There was a gate in the center field fence, and we drove in, and right across second base, over the mound to home plate, and we all got out and packed. There wasn't a blade of grass within 50 miles of that place, and it was really something. And there must have been, there must have been 10,000 people there, and it was a zinc and copper mining town that owned the team, and everybody in town worked for this copper and zinc mining company, so the price of admission was taken out of their paycheck, so everybody showed up. So we had like 10. There were people sitting on top of our dugout. They were on top of the walls. That was crazy. And then Nogales, we went into Nogales, and in Nogales we played in a bull ring. When there wasn't a bullfight, they put bases out on the field, and that's how we played. So there was Tucson, Phoenix, Douglas, and Yuma in the United States, and then we had 4 teams in Mexico. So that was my second year. And the third year, I was at San Jose in the California State League. That was a Class C league also. That was a Pittsburgh farm club. And my leg really never healed. And Branch Rookie, who ran the Pittsburgh Pirate team, and his honchos would come around periodically to the minor league teams, and they announced before, said everybody be out at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So everybody be out there in the morning. We played 95% of the games at night. So he and his scouts and everything would evaluate the players. They'd take all the pitchers, put them in the outfield. They'd take the catchers and put them at shortstop. Just switch around to see if they're playing the wrong positions. So that's because of my leg it never really healed all that well. Branch Rickey approached me about becoming a catcher. He said, because at third base, the first move that you make at third base is to your left into the hole between short and third, and that was my bad calf. So he said, maybe you slow it up a little bit. And at the time, I had a good arm, so he said, we need catchers. So that next year was my first year in catching.
And then it's just
That was
stuck.
1959. That's the year we were married. And we went to Idaho Falls in the Pioneer League. And that was my first year full-time catching. But that was really something because, in the minor leagues, it's important to be versatile. And that year, I played probably 60% of the games as a catcher. But I played 7 positions that year. I played everything except first base and pitcher. I mean, they found out, the manager, Bob Clear, found out that I had played the infield, so he started me at shortstop a couple games, and when somebody was hurt. So when I went to the ballpark, I never knew where the hell I was playing.
Just a utility guy.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing. So then, the following year, I was a full-time catcher, and then I went to AAA, and then I was bought by, prior to the 1962, in 1962, the New York Mets and the Houston Colt 45 came into the National League, and each team had to put up, I've forgotten how many players it was, but on a 40-man roster, they had to put up X number of players for the expansion. And each team, the Mets and Houston, got to choose the number of players. I think the first 2 picks cost them $50,000, and then the next 3 was like $25,000, and then on down. And that's how they built the 2 expansion teams. So I was taken off the Pittsburgh roster by Houston.
Okay. So the '62 season was their inaugural season.
That was the first year.
So what was that like?
Yeah, actually, because I was bought by Houston, in 1961, I played for, they were called the Houston Buffs. It was a AAA team in Houston that was in the American Association, was a AAA league. We had Columbus, Ohio, and Charlotte, North Carolina, and Louisville, Kentucky. It was a AAA team. And then the following year was my first year in the major leagues. That was 1962. That was the expansion. The Mets, because of being in New York, they really went for the name players. They had all the guys that were recognizable names and so forth. Whereas Houston had never had a major league team. So the people down there were not as baseball sophisticated. So, Houston really went for younger guys to build a franchise.
Develop into.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Who was the greatest player you ever played against?
Played against?
Oh, with and against.
Well, I didn't play with any great players. I think probably people have asked me that before, and they're always surprised that I didn't say Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays. I think the best player I ever played against and saw was Roberto Clemente.
It's incredible.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. He wasn't very big. He was only about 5'10", but he had the best throwing arm I'd ever seen, and plus he was really fast. And as you probably know, I mean, he hit 300 every year. Yeah. He was a great player, and had he played in New York or L.A., he would have been a superstar. Yeah. But he was probably the best player I ever saw.
Incredible. Yeah, he ended with 3,000 hits, I believe.
Yeah, he was remarkable. Yeah, he could do everything.
What's the greatest memory of playing baseball? Is there one that stands out the most?
Well, opening day. I mean, first
60
game in major leagues. That was memorable. But in 1963, I was the opening day catcher. We opened in Houston against the Giants, and it was 104 degrees, and it was like 95% humidity. In those days, it was before the dome. We played outdoors, and it was
3 years in that stadium, I believe, and then they moved to the Astros.
Old bus stadium. It was terrible.
It was actually sold to Mexico.
That's right. They packed it up and shipped it down to the Mexican League. But that was a big thrill. Opening day. It was really funny to see everybody in the stands. I mean, there's probably 40-some thousand people, and probably 25 of those people had umbrellas because it was like 104 and the humidity was terrible. And I remember catching the game, and in the 6th inning, my uniform, we had these wool, terrible heavy uniforms. In the sixth inning, my whole uniform was just saturated, weighed about 20 pounds. I went in, changed my whole uniform in the sixth inning, went back out and finished the game. And when the game was over, I weighed myself. I had lost 12 pounds
Wow.
in one game. I mean, the humidity was just unbelievable. You could look out on the field and you could just see the heat waves. I mean, it was just, the teams coming in there just hated it. It was just terrible.
Are there any important relationships you've built through the whole experience?
Well, Bob Fontaine, the original guy that signed me, was became a very close friend, and we saw a lot of each other during the off season, and you know, he followed me around during the while I was playing also, but you know, the problem is in professional baseball, I guess it's going like somebody said, it's a lot like the Army. You know, you go in and you meet people from all over the country, and you became good friends and so forth, and all of a sudden your term was up or your service is up and you never saw them again. Well, a lot of that was in baseball too, because you know, the guys I played with, I didn't play with anybody from around here. I mean, I played with people from all over the world. I mean, we had guys from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Canada, I mean, all over, and we were good friends. And then, you know, after I retired, you know, we communicated a little bit with Christmas cards and this and that, and that was pretty much it. Never really had any real long-lasting relationships. There's one kid that was my roommate at Houston that went to the University of Santa Clara, that lives over in East Bay, and I would see him probably the most of any of these, Ernie Fazio. But that was pretty much it. I don't really see. I have a group of guys that I have lunch with about every 6 weeks. One of the guys was the head of public relations for the Giants for years, and he was a minority owner. And he lives half the year in Vegas and half the year in Atherton. And we have lunch about every 6 weeks or so. And it's like a cast of characters. You never know who's going to show up. He texts us or emails everybody that we're going to have lunch at certain. And then I never know who's going to. Len Gabrielson played with the Giants and the Dodgers, and Ernie Broglio lives in Santa Clara. Jimmy Davenport used to come, Hobie Lander. So it's just a group of guys get together, but that's about the extent of it. I mean, it's just a lunch and that's it.
That's awesome. How do you compare today's game with back in your day? And do you think like technology is good or bad for the game?
Well, I really don't know a lot about the technology. I understand now. We used to have a scouting report. When we would go into a city to play a team we hadn't played in a while, or a new team at the start of the season, the catchers and the pitchers would sit down and we'd go, just like you're doing, reading off. The first hitter was Jesus Salou, and everybody would voice opinion how you're going to pitch him. The next guy, how you're going to pitch. And that was the extent of it. Nowadays, I mean, they have computer readouts. You see the guys in the dugout with their iPads, and they know exactly what this guy has thrown, every pitch. I mean, it's unbelievable. I really have not kept up on that, but the only difference I see today, and I know it sound like an old fart, but when I was playing in the '60s, everybody in the major leagues was a major league player. But now with these expansion, all these teams, I would say there's probably 60% of the guys on major league rosters are legitimate major league players, particularly in the pitchers. You know, they'll have 9 or 10 pitchers. Maybe 4 of them could play in the major leagues 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I think that's why home runs have increased and batting averages increased, because they've really diluted the stock. I mean, there's just not the players. And then plus, it's ridiculous. A pitcher will go out and pitch 5 innings, just enough to qualify for a win, and then the middle relief guy comes in and throws a 6th and 7th, and then the closer comes in and throws a 9th. I mean, it's ridiculous. I was just reading the other day, Warren Spahn and Juan Marichal pitched a 16-inning game. They pitched the whole game. nowadays they're worried about pitch counts with these guys, and these guys are all tremendous athletes, and they get strong guys, but they limit them to 90 pitches or 85 pitches, and they're worried they're going to wear them out. And it's gotten more and more technical now, I guess.
Definitely.
Yeah, so it's the only drawback I have. I mean, I watch baseball games, and they absolutely drive me crazy, particularly Bochy. I mean, Bochy must make 100 trips to the mound to be,
Oh,
and
definitely.
he comes out and takes out the pitcher, and another batter will come up, he'll go out and take another pitcher out. I mean, it just drives me
Just goes
absolutely
through the
crazy.
whole bullpen.
I mean, this righty-lefty thing is really overblown. There are a lot of guys that prefer to hit a left-handed, would rather bat against a left-handed pitcher because the ball's coming at you, and they know, where it's going to break. But just the opposite, if a right-handed pitcher's throwing, they throw it into the left-hand batter's box, and the hitter gives up on it, it comes right down into the strike zone. I mean, it's more difficult,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's a tremendous advantage, this lefty-righty stuff that,
To the point where it's worth taking out the pitcher. and
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it just drives me crazy.
Definitely. Obviously playing for the eventual Astros, was this last World Series particularly special for you?
I don't know how many emails and texts I've gotten from players that I played around, people I know plus players, congratulating me. I have absolutely no feelings for the Houston. I mean, there again, it's like in the Army. When you leave, it's over. You don't see these people, and I have really not had a lot of communication with Houston. My son's on their Houston website. I mean, he gets all the information, anything pertaining to Houston, and he sends it to me occasionally. But I have not, because I played for Pittsburgh, then I was traded. I went to Cincinnati, and then I was traded to the White Sox for part of one season, and so I ended up being traded. The last year I played was when we were playing at the end of the season, 1963, against the Giants in San Francisco, and there was a close play at the plate, and I went to Felipe Alou was coming in, and I thought he was going to slide earlier, but he really slid late and just knocked me ass over tea kettle and dislocated my shoulder and everything. And so that was pretty much, the trainer came out and he set my shoulder, popped it back in. He sat down on home plate, and I was on the dirt, and he sat down on home plate and he put his feet in my neck and my armpit, and he grabbed my arm and he pulled it out and he put it back in. And then that winter, I rested all winter, and it seemed to be fine. And I went to spring training with Cincinnati that year, and I was playing catch, cautiously throwing and everything seemed to be fine. And the first exhibition game against the White Sox, a guy tried to steal, and I came out of behind home plate, and I fired it the second, and that was it. My arm popped right back out.
Wow.
And it just never. I'm sure years later I had rotator surgery in my shoulder, but in those days they didn't know what a rotator was. But I'm sure the rotator was torn and never healed. So I went to San Diego at the end, and I just pinch hit and warmed up pitchers, and that was it. I just never. They wanted to operate on my shoulder, and then they'd have to put pins in, and they said it would be a 2-year process, and I said, no, that's it, I'm done. So that's when I quit. And I was traded that winter. I was traded to the Chicago Cubs. I don't know if they didn't know that my arm was gone, but I was traded to Chicago Cubs, and I wrote them a letter requesting to be on the voluntary retired list.
Wow. Incredible.
That was it.
Pretty incredible story. Awesome. Do you have any advice for young college kid and his fellow classmates? Just any life advice to finish it off.
Stay in school and get a good education.
Amen.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, I'm sure you're aware. It's getting more and more competitive
Definitely.
in every field. Right here where we live, in Silicon Valley. I mean, unless you have a double MBA or you're I mean, it's really very, very difficult. We're fortunate, I guess your dad, we're all fortunate that we sort of established ourselves, here in the area. But, I don't know how many, if you could, or if I could. I doubt very seriously if I could afford to buy this house now. I mean, the way the economy is now. I mean, we've been here almost 30 years, and it's really very difficult. And young people like yourself, that we have friends that have done well, and their kids want to stay in the area, but they can't. I mean, unless they go to work for, IBM or Facebook or Cisco, one of these companies at a high salary, they just can't stay here. So it's very important to get a good education and establish yourself early.
All right. Thank you so much.
What's your major?
I'm a marketing major.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Marketing major.
Find the next hula hoop or.
All right.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Nice meeting you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered all your questions.
Perfect.
It seems like this group I was talking about that we have lunch together. Whenever we all get together, there's sometimes 7 or 8 guys who all get together, and I'll bring up a subject about maybe one of my favorite players when I was in the Pirates was a guy by the name of Smokey Burgess. He was an old catcher, grumpy old guy, and I was telling a story about him, how he handled young pitchers and so forth. And then that reminded Davenport about a story about Smokey. And then that reminded somebody. And pretty soon, it just one story leads into another. So these lunches sometimes take 2 or 3 hours.
You just lose track of the time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we try to do it about every 6 or 8 weeks or whatever. Unfortunately, Davenport's gone, but there's a few of us still around.
It's pretty cool though that you guys still get together.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's and everybody's got a story. They all pretty much went through. It's very, very seldom that a guy comes right out of high school or college and goes right to the major leagues. Nowadays, they're able to do it because, the expanded rosters. I mean, when I was playing, if you sign, like I signed with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I had to play for them forever until they traded me or released me. There was no such thing as free agency. You couldn't say go to another team. So if you were say in my day, if you were a center fielder in the Giant organization, I mean, you'd be in AAA forever because Willie Mays wasn't going anywhere. But nowadays, these players will play out. I think they have to play, they have an option year, 2 years or something, and then they go into free agency and then they can move on to another team. But nowadays, these guys go from wherever the money is, they just go from team to team. When I was a kid, I could name every player on every team, and in many cases, their number. But nowadays, I watch a game and I said, where in the hell did he come from? I thought he was with Atlanta, and then they just move around. But it's really changed. Plus the money.
A lot more money.
Oh God, it's ridiculous. My first year in the major leagues, the minimum salary now I think is $575,000. A first year player, that's the minimum they can pay a first year player. My first year in the major leagues, it was $9,000. And we'd go on the road, we would get $10 a day meal money, and now I think the players get like $85 a day for meals. So, I mean, it's crazy.
Crazy. Yeah, a lot more money in it now, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's and I don't know, and the careers they don't last nearly as long as they used to. I mean, guys like Mays, we had a guy in Houston, Bobby Shantz, was a pitcher. I mean, he admitted to be 35 or 36 then, and guys would say, I saw him 15 years ago, he was 35 or something. So guys would hang on. I mean, our day, you'd almost have to tear the uniform off these guys to get them to quit. But these guys make so much money today that, I mean, there's guys, I was reading the other day about one of the guys that was just traded, and the team that he was playing for was still paying $15 million for his salary. I forget who that was, and the team that he was traded to was only gonna pick up like $3 or $4 million of the salary, because they have these long-term contracts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're halfway smart and you're gonna make $4 or $5, $6 million a year, I mean, you'll never have to work again your whole life.
No, yeah.
Yeah. And everybody I played with and played again, everybody towards the end of the season would always be talking about what they were gonna do during the off season. I know, like Davenport worked for a meat company selling meat. Tom Haller sold insurance. Hobie Lander sold Volkswagens. I mean, everybody during the off season had to work to supplement their income, because you weren't making, you know, like my first year was $9,000. The highest paid guy on our team in 1962 was $14,000. But in 1962, when George and I went to Houston, you know, it was so friggin' hot down there that we had a car without air conditioning. So one of our radio sponsors owned a Pontiac agency. So I approached him and I bought a brand new Pontiac station wagon, fully loaded, for $2,600. Now it'd be $75,000 or whatever.
At least.
Yeah, so I mean, it was $9,000 my time, but it,
Yeah.
you know, it's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right.
All right.
That was actually,
Very cool.
that was very cool.
Now how do I
Thanks for your
stop
time.
this? Do I just hit this button?
Hit that
here?
red button again.
The red button again,
Yeah.
okay.